I wake up to the sound of my own snoring. That's new. The snoring. I never used to snore. But here I am at 68 years old in this recliner that has molded itself to the shape of my back like a tomb. The remote is on my chest. The television is playing some home shopping network. A woman is selling a knife set that can cut through a tin can and still slice a tomato paper thin. I watch her for a minute. She has a nice smile. Probably fake, like everything else. The house is quiet. That's not new. The quiet has been here for 3 years now. Ever since Linda left. Ever since the kids stopped calling. Ever since I became the man who lives alone on Maple Drive. The neighbors wave, but they don't stop to talk anymore. I think they're afraid I'll ask for help. Or worse, I'll tell them the truth. I got up slow. That's also new. The knees don't work like they used to. I made my way to the kitchen and poured Folgers into the same mug I've used for 15 years. It says, World's Greatest Grandpa on the side. My granddaughter Emma gave it to me when she was 6. She's 14 now. I haven't seen her in 2 years. Her mother, my daughter Sarah, decided I was toxic after the divorce. Toxic. That's the word they use now. It means you're inconvenient. It means you remind them of something they'd rather forget. I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee and I opened the drawer where I keep the papers. Not the important papers. Those are in the lockbox at the bank. These are the old papers, the receipts, the warranties, the photographs I couldn't throw away. I pulled out a photo of Tommy from his high school graduation. He's 22 in that picture, smiling like the whole world owed him something. He had his arm around me, and we were both squinting into the sun. I remember that day. I remember thinking I had done something right. I had raised a boy who looked me in the eye and shook my hand like a man, like a partner. Tommy is 38 now. He's a financial advisor. He manages other people's money. I think about that sometimes and I laugh. A hollow laugh that doesn't go anywhere. The coffee was hot and bitter. I drank it black now. Linda used to put cream and sugar in it for me. She said I made it too strong. She said I was going to burn a hole in my stomach. I wished she had been right. A hole in my stomach would have healed by now. I want to tell you what happened to me. Not because I want your pity. I don't. Pity is for people who still believe someone is coming to save them. I'm past that. I'm telling you because I need someone to know the truth. The whole truth. Before I forget the details. Before the anger turns into something soft and useless, like resignation. My name is Frank. I'm 71 now. The thing that broke me happened when I was 68, right at the beginning of the quiet, right after Linda walked out the door with 2 suitcases and a look on her face that I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. Like she had been holding her breath for 40 years and finally let it go. We met in 1982. I was 29, she was 26. She worked at the front desk of a car dealership. I came in to buy a Ford Bronco. I didn't buy the Bronco. I bought her dinner instead. She had long brown hair and she laughed with her whole body. When she laughed, her shoulders shook and her eyes got small, and I thought I had never seen anything more beautiful. I married her 8 months later. Everyone said we were rushing. My mother said, marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. I told my mother to mind her own business. We had Tommy first. That was 1984. Then Sarah in 1986. I worked construction. Then I got my contractor's license. Then I started my own home renovation company, Frank's Home Solutions. I painted it on the side of a white van, and I drove that van for 23 years. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I missed soccer games. I missed school plays. I missed parent-teacher conferences. But I told myself I was doing it for them. Every nail I hammered, every floor I tiled, every roof I patched was a brick in the wall of their future. That's what I told myself at night when I came home with sawdust in my hair and pain in my
lower back. Linda stayed home with the kids. That was the deal. She raised them, she made the meals, she kept the house, and she did a good job. I never doubted that. The kids were healthy, they were smart.
They got decent grades. Tommy played Little League, Sarah took dance lessons. We went to Disney World twice. We had a camper we took to the lake every summer. I look back at those years and they look like a movie someone else lived. A movie with a happy ending that got scrapped at the last minute. When Tommy graduated college, I paid for it. Every penny. He wanted to study finance. I didn't know what that meant, but I wrote the checks. $28,000 a year for 4 years. I didn't blink. That's what fathers do. They provide. When Sarah got married, I paid for the wedding. $32,000. She wanted the barn venue with the string lights and the rustic centerpieces. She wanted the photographer from Chicago. She wanted the live band instead of a DJ. I wrote the checks, and I danced with her at the reception, and I told her she was the most beautiful bride I had ever seen. I meant it. Her husband Mark was a nice guy at first. He sold medical equipment. He had a firm handshake, and he called me sir for the first 2 years. Then he stopped calling me sir. Then he stopped calling me at all. Then he started looking at me like I was a problem he hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Tommy got married to a girl named Rachel. She was a nurse. Pretty, quiet. She didn't laugh like Linda. She laughed like she was apologizing for taking up space. I liked her anyway. She made Tommy happy. Or so I thought. They had 2 kids, Emma and Lucas. I was there for both births. I waited in the hospital hallway while Tommy paced and Rachel screamed. When Emma came out, I held her and I cried. I cried because I was a grandfather. I cried because I had made it. I had built something that would outlast me. That was the peak. I see that now. The years after that were not a decline. They were a plateau. Then the plateau cracked. Then the ground opened up. I retired when I was 65. I sold the business to a young guy named Derek who had worked for me for 12 years. He gave me a fair price, $400,000. Plus I had my 401k. Plus I had the house, which was paid off. Plus I had some savings. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. Linda and I talked about traveling. We talked about buying an RV and seeing the national parks. We talked about spending winters in Arizona. We talked about all of it like it was going to happen. It didn't happen. A year after I retired, Linda started acting strange. She would take her phone into the bathroom and close the door. She would go for walks that lasted 2 hours. She joined a yoga class. She started dressing differently. Younger, brighter colors. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. I thought she was just enjoying her freedom. I thought she was just happy to have me home after all those years of me working. I was wrong. I found out about Paul on a Tuesday. I had gone to the hardware store to buy a new garden hose. My phone was dead, so I used Linda's phone to check the time. A text message came through while I was holding it. It said, "Last night was amazing. I can still smell you on my pillow." I stood in the garden hose aisle at Home Depot with my wife's phone in my hand, and I read those words 5 times, 6 times, 10 times. The letters didn't change. The betrayal didn't become less real with repetition. I scrolled up. There were months of messages. Months. They had been seeing each other for almost a year. Paul was her yoga instructor. He was 53. He had a beard and a man bun, and he posted pictures of himself doing handstands on mountaintops. I looked him up later. He looked like every cliché you can imagine. And my wife had left me for him. She didn't even fight when I confronted her. That was the worst part. I came home with a garden hose, and I put the phone on the kitchen counter, and I said, "Who is Paul?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You know who Paul is." I said, "I want to hear you say it." She said, "I'm in love with him, Frank. I'm sorry, but I'm in love with him." I waited for the but. There was no but. There was just the silence of a 40-year marriage ending in a sentence that took 3 seconds to say. She moved out 2 weeks later. She took her clothes, her jewelry, her grandmother's china, and a painting we bought in Santa Fe on our 25th anniversary. She left the furniture. She left the photographs. She left me. I sat in the empty living room that night, and I tried to cry. but nothing came out. My eyes were dry. My throat was tight. I felt like I had swallowed a rock. The kids found out. Tommy called me. He said, "Mom told us everything." I said, "Okay." He said, "Are you all right?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you two were never really happy anyway." I hung up on him. I hung up on my own son because he told me my marriage of 40 years was never really happy. As if he had been there. As if he knew what we had before the silence grew between us. Sarah came over with Mark. She brought a casserole. She hugged me and she cried. Mark stood by the door with his arms crossed. He didn't say much. He looked around the living room like he was calculating square footage. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too numb. But I remember that look. I remember it now. After Linda left, I fell apart for a while. I stopped eating. I stopped cleaning. The house got dark. The mail piled up. I drank bourbon in the afternoons, which turned into bourbon in the mornings. My brother Pete came to check on me and found me asleep on the couch at 2 in the afternoon with a half-empty bottle on the floor. He sat down next to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Frank, you have to pull yourself together." I said, "I don't know how." He said, "You start by throwing out the bottle." I threw out the bottle. I started eating again. I started going to the grocery store. I started mowing the lawn. Little by little, I climbed back up the cliff. But I was different. The part of me that believed in love was gone. The part of me that trusted people was gone. The only thing left was the part that remembered. That's when the thing with the kids started. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in small increments. A missed phone call here, a canceled dinner there. Tommy stopped bringing the grandkids over on Sundays. He said they were busy with soccer. He said Rachel's parents wanted more time with them. I understood. I told myself I understood. Families are complicated after a divorce. People take sides. Even when they say they aren't taking sides, they take sides. Linda was the fun one. Linda was the yoga pants and the brunch and the spontaneous road trips. I was the tired old man in the recliner with the bad knees. I was the reminder of the life they wanted to forget. Sarah still came by once a week. She would bring groceries. She would sit at the kitchen table and look at her phone while I talked. She would nod and say, "That's crazy, and I can't believe it, and you deserve better." But her eyes were somewhere else. They were always somewhere else. Mark never came. He had excuses. Work, a golf tournament, a headache. A headache? Like a 40-year-old man gets headaches that last 6 months. I should have seen it coming. I should have seen all of it coming. But you don't look for betrayal in the faces of your own children. You just don't. Your brain refuses to compute it. Your heart refuses to hold the possibility. So, you ignore the signs. You explain them away. You tell yourself they're just busy. You tell yourself they love you. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. It was a Wednesday in October. I remember the leaves were turning. The air smelled like wood smoke and dying things. I got a call from my accountant, a man named Jerry, who had handled my taxes for 20 years. He said, "Frank, do you have a moment?" I said, "Sure, Jerry, what's going on?" He said, "I need to ask you about some transfers from your savings account." I said, "What transfers?" He said there have been 5 transfers over the last 8 months, totaling $87,000. They were all made to an account in your son's name. My hands started shaking. I put the phone down on the counter. I picked it back up. I said, "Jerry, did you say Tommy?" He said, "Yes, Frank. Thomas Frank Jr. The transfers were authorized with your online banking credentials." I said, "I didn't authorize anything." Jerry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Frank, I think you need to check your computer." I checked my computer. I checked my online banking. And there they were, 5 transfers, each one for about $17,000. Each one labeled home improvement. Each one sent to Tommy's account. I never wrote home improvement. I never wrote any of it. Someone had accessed my account. Someone had used my password. Someone had drained $87,000 from the money I had saved for 30 years. I called Tommy. He didn't answer. I called him again. He didn't answer. I called Sarah. She answered. She said, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" I said, "Do you know anything about Tommy taking money from my account?" She was quiet for too long. Then she said, "I think you should talk to Tommy about that." I said, "Sarah, I'm talking to you right now." She said, "Dad, I really think you should talk to Tommy." Then she hung up. I drove to Tommy's house. It's a nice house in a nice subdivision. 2 stories, a 3-car garage, a lawn that looks like a golf course. He bought it 5 years ago. I helped him with the down payment. $30,000. I gave it to him as a gift. He said he would pay me back. He never did. I didn't care. He was my son. I knocked on the door. Rachel answered. She looked at me and her face went pale. She said, "Frank." Not Dad, Frank. I said, "Where is Tommy?" She said, "He's not here." I said, "Rachel, I know about the money." She looked down at her feet. She said, "Frank, please don't do this here." I said, "Do what?" She said, "Cause a scene. The neighbors." I pushed past her. I walked into the living room. Tommy was sitting on the couch with his laptop. He looked up at me, and for 1 second, I saw something in his eyes. Guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by something else, something hard. He closed the laptop. He said, "Dad, you need to calm down." I said, $87,000, Tommy. He said, "It was a loan." "A loan?" He said, "Yeah, a loan. I was going to pay you back." I said, "You didn't ask me."
He said I knew you would say no. I said, "You're goddamn right I would say no. That's my retirement money. That's my money." He stood up. He's taller than me now. When did that happen? He looked down at me and he said, "Dad, you don't need that money. You have the house. You have the 401k. You have Social Security. We needed it more. We had credit card debt. We had the mortgage. We had the kids' school." I said, "You should have asked me." He said, "You wouldn't have understood." Understood what? That you're not the only person in this family who has needs. I stood there in my son's living room, and I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. My heart had already been broken by Linda. This was something deeper, something I didn't have a name for. It was the realization that my son saw me not as his father, but as an obstacle, a wallet with legs, a thing to be managed. I said, "I want my money back." He laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "Dad, we don't have it. We used it to pay off the credit cards and put new windows in the house and take a trip to Disney World, the trip you took last spring, the trip you asked why you weren't invited to. Remember that? You asked why we didn't invite you. Well, now you know. We used your money to go to Disney World without you." I left. I walked out of that house, and I got in my truck, and I sat on the driveway for 20 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there.
The leaves were falling on the windshield, orange and brown and red, the colors of decay. I called the bank. I filed a report. I told them I didn't authorize the transfers. They said they would investigate. They said it might take 60 days. I said I don't have 60 days. I have bills. I have a mortgage. I have a life that is falling apart. They said they were sorry. They said they understood. They didn't understand. Sarah called me that night. She said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." I said, "What?" She said, "Mark and I have been struggling, financially." I said, "Sarah, please, not now." She said, "No, Dad, you need to listen. Tommy told us about the money, and I know you're angry, but you have to understand. You always held money over our heads. Every birthday check, every Christmas gift. It always came with strings. You always made us feel like we owed you something." I said, "I never made you feel that way." She said, "Yes, you did. You just didn't see it. Every time you paid for something, you brought it up later. Remember when you paid for my wedding?
You told everyone at the reception. You told Uncle Pete. You told Aunt Carol. You told the bartender. I said I was proud. She said, you were keeping score. You've always been keeping score. And we're tired of it. We're tired of being in debt to you. I didn't remember it that way. I still don't remember it that way. But maybe she's right. Maybe I did keep score. Maybe I did make them feel small. I don't know anymore.
Memory is not a tape recorder. Memory is a story you tell yourself until you believe it. Maybe I told myself I was the good father, the generous father, the father who sacrificed everything. Maybe I never saw what I really was. But that doesn't excuse what they did. Nothing excuses that. The bank investigation went nowhere. Tommy had used my password. He had guessed it. My birthday. My own son guessed my password because he knew me better than anyone. He knew I used my birthday for everything. He logged into my account from his computer, and he transferred the money, and he never thought twice about it. The bank said since he had access to my credentials, there was nothing they could do. They said I could pursue legal action, but that would mean pressing charges against my own son. I thought about it. I really did. I met with a lawyer, a woman named Diane with gray hair and tired eyes. She laid it all out for me. The cost, the time, the likelihood of winning, the likelihood of Tommy going to jail if I press charges. She said, Frank, are you sure you want to do this? I said, he stole from me, Diane. She said, I know. But he's your son. And once you go down this road, you can't go back. I said, he already made it so we can't go back. I didn't press charges. I couldn't. Not because I forgave him, but because I didn't have the strength. I was 68 years old. I had lost my wife. I had lost my money. I couldn't lose my son too, even though he had already lost me. Even though he had already made his choice. The rest of the money went next. That's the part I still can't say out loud without my voice catching. The $87,000 was just the beginning. Because while I was distracted by Tommy's betrayal, Sarah and Mark were doing something worse. They came to visit me a week after the Disney World revelation. Mark was different this time, softer. He brought a 6-pack of beer. He sat on my couch and he asked me how I was doing. He said he was sorry about what Tommy did. He said family shouldn't treat family that way. I was so starved for kindness. I believed him. I let him in. I let them both in. Sarah said, Dad, we're worried about you. You're alone in this big house. You're not taking care of yourself. The yard is a mess. The gutters are full. The paint is peeling. I said, I know. I just don't have the energy anymore. Mark said, we could help you sell it. I said, sell what? He said, the house. It's worth a lot of money, Frank. Probably $600,000, maybe more. You could sell it, move into a smaller place, a condo, something easier to maintain. You'd have cash left over. You could travel. You could enjoy your retirement. I said, I don't want to sell the house. This is my house. I raised you in this house, Sarah. Your mother and I bought this house in 1989. I replaced the roof myself. I built the deck. I planted the maple tree in the backyard. This house is me. If I sell this house, there's nothing left. Sarah squeezed my hand.
She said, Dad, we're not saying you have to sell it. We're just saying there are options. Let us help you explore the options. They came back the next week with papers. Documents from a financial planner, documents from a real estate agent, documents from a lawyer. They said, we just want to make sure you understand everything. We just want to protect you. You're vulnerable right now. You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Let us help you think clearly. I signed something. I don't remember what. There were so many papers. My eyes were tired. My hands were shaking. Mark put a pen in my hand, and I signed where he told me to sign. I trusted them. They were my children. My daughter and her husband. They wouldn't hurt me. Not after everything. Not after Tommy. They did. 3 months later, I got a letter from a law firm. A different law firm.
It said that I had transferred ownership of my house to a trust. The trust was managed by Mark and Sarah. They were now the sole trustees. They had the authority to sell the property without my consent. The letter said I had signed a document waiving my rights to contest the transfer. I drove to Sarah's house. I didn't knock. I walked in. She was in the kitchen with Mark. They were laughing about something. When they saw me, the laughter stopped. I held up the letter. I said, "What is this?" Sarah said, "Dad, let us explain." I said, "What is this?" Mark said, "It's a trust, Frank. It's a legal structure that protects your assets." I said, "From who?"
From creditors, from medical bills, from anyone who might try to take your money. I said, "You mean from me? You're protecting my assets from me?" Sarah started crying. She said, "Dad, it's not like that. We were trying to help you. You were so depressed after Mom left. You weren't making good decisions. We were afraid you would lose everything." I said, "So you decided to take everything instead?" She said, "No, that's not what happened." I said, "Then give it back. Give me back my house." She looked at Mark. Mark looked at the floor. Sarah said, "We can't." I said, "What do you mean he can't?" She said, "We already started the process. We listed the house. We have an offer, $710,000. We're going to use the money to pay off our debts and put a down payment on a bigger house. The kids need more space. Lucas is getting too big to share a room with Emma." I said, "Sarah, that's my house. That's my home." She said, "Dad, you can live with us. We have a guest room. You can stay there until we find you a nice condo." I said, "I don't want to live with you. I don't want a nice condo. I want my house, the house I built, the house I paid for, the house I raised you in." Mark stepped forward. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Frank, we're doing this for your own good." I knocked his hand off. I said, "Don't touch me." He said, "Frank, you need to calm down." I said, "Don't tell me to calm down in my daughter's kitchen." He said, "It's not your daughter's kitchen. It's our kitchen. We bought this house. We paid for it. With our money, not yours. You don't get to control us anymore." I looked at Sarah. She was still crying, but her eyes were hard. They were the eyes of a stranger. I said, "Sarah, please, I'm your father." She said, "I know, Dad. I love you. But we have to think about our family now, our future. You had your turn. Now it's our turn." I left. I drove home to a house that wasn't mine anymore. I sat in the living room and I looked at the walls. The walls I painted. The floors I sanded. The windows I installed. None of it was mine. None of it had been mine for 3 months. I just didn't know it. The sale went through. They got $710,000. Mark and Sarah paid off their credit cards, their car loans, and their student loans. They put a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in a gated community. They sent me a picture of their new house. The guest room where I could stay was in the back. It had a twin bed and a window that faced the fence. I didn't stay there. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It's small. The walls are thin. I can hear my neighbor coughing through the wall at night. But it's mine. The rent comes out of my Social Security check every month. I have the 401k still. That's something. Not much, but something. Tommy never paid me back. He doesn't call anymore. Neither does Sarah. I get a text on my birthday. "Happy birthday, Dad." That's it. 3 words. No punctuation. No love. No, I'm sorry. No, let's have dinner. Just happy birthday, Dad. Rachel sends me pictures of the grandkids sometimes, Emma and Lucas. They're growing so fast. Emma has braces now. Lucas lost his 2 front teeth. I look at the pictures and I don't recognize them. They're not my grandchildren anymore. They're the grandchildren of a man I used to be. Linda married Paul. I saw the announcement on Facebook. They had a small ceremony in a garden somewhere. She looked happy. Younger. I didn't feel anything when I saw it. That's the truth. I didn't feel anger or sadness or relief. I felt nothing. Just the empty space where my heart used to be. My brother Pete calls me once a week. He's the only one. He says, "Frank, you should sue them."
I say, Suhu. He says, all of them. Tommy, Sarah, Mark, the bank, someone, anyone. I say, Pete, I'm 71 years old. I don't have the energy to sue anyone. He says, it's the principal. I say, the principal died a long time ago, along with everything else. I go to the hardware store sometimes, not because I need anything, because I miss the smell, the sawdust, the paint, the sound of hammers in the distance. I walk down the aisles and I remember building the deck on the back of the house. I remember Tommy handing me mails when he was 8 years old. I remember teaching him how to use a level, how to read a tape measure, how to drive a nail without bending it. He was so proud when he got it right. He would look up at me with those big eyes and he would say, "Did I do good, Dad?" And I would say, "Yeah, buddy, you did real good." Now, he's a man who stole from me, who looked me in the eye and laughed, who chose money over his own father. And I have to live with that. I have to live with the fact that somewhere along the line I failed. I failed to teach him the only lesson that mattered, that family is not a transaction, that love is not a debt, that you don't steal from the people who gave you everything. I sit in my apartment now. It's late. The neighbor has stopped coughing. The television is on, but the sound is off. I'm looking at a photograph. It's from 1995. Tommy is 11. Sarah is 9. We're at the lake. They're both wearing life jackets. They're both smiling. Linda is in the background. She's waving at the camera. Her hair is wet. She's beautiful. We were all together. We were all happy. We didn't know what was coming. None of us knew. I put the photograph back in the drawer. I close the drawer. I turn off the light. The apartment goes dark. The only sound is the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rush of traffic on the highway. I lie down on the bed. I stare at the ceiling. I think about all of it. The love, the loss, the betrayal, the silence. And I wonder if they ever think about me. If Tommy ever lies awake at night and remembers the way I taught him to throw a baseball. If Sarah ever looks at her new house and remembers the room where she slept as a girl.
If Linda ever smells sawdust and thinks of the man who spent 40 years building a life for her. Probably not. Probably they're sleeping just fine. Probably they've already told themselves a different story. A story where I was the villain, where I deserved what happened, where they were the victims all along. That's the thing about betrayal. The people who do it always find a way to sleep at night. They rewrite history. They reframe the truth. They convince themselves they had no choice. And the people who get left behind, the people who get used and thrown away, the people who gave everything and got nothing in return, they're the ones who lie awake. They're the ones who stare at the ceiling. They're the ones who hold the photographs and wonder where it all went wrong. I'm 71 years old. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. A man who loved his family more than anything in the world. And they destroyed me. Not all at once, not with one big explosion, but slowly, quietly, over years, with smiles on their faces and kind words on their lips. The worst part isn't the money. The worst part isn't the house. The worst part is that I still love them. After everything, after all of it, I still love my children. I still love the woman who left me for a yoga instructor. I still love the grandchildren who don't know my name anymore. That's the part that breaks me. Not what they did, but what I still feel. I close my eyes. The ceiling disappears. The apartment disappears.
I'm back at the lake in 1995. The sun is warm. The water is cold. Tommy is splashing Sarah. Linda is laughing. And I am standing on the dock with my hands on my hips thinking, this is it. This is the life I built. This is the life that will last forever. But forever is a lie. Forever is something we tell ourselves so we can get through the day. The truth is, everything ends. everything falls apart. And the people you love the most are the ones who hand you the hammer. I fall asleep eventually. I always do. The sleep of the betrayed, dreamless and shallow. The sleep of a man who has nothing left to lose. When I wake up, the sun will be coming through the thin curtains. The neighbor will be coughing. The television will still be on. And I will make coffee in the same mug that says World's Greatest Grandpa. I will drink it black. I will sit in the silence, and I will wait for a phone call that never comes. That's my story. That's all of it. I hope you never have to live it. I hope your children are better than mine. I hope your wife stays. I hope your house stays yours. I hope you never know what it feels like to be a ghost in your own life. But if you do, if any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. There are a lot of us out here, sitting in our apartments, drinking our black coffee, staring at the walls, waiting for something that will never come.